If you are a Metal Gear Solid fan, then you are most definitely excited for Metal Gear Solid Delta. Although we still don't have a release date, it's quickly becoming one of the most anticipated games coming out. But with it being a remake, it has some huge shoes to fill considering the legacy of the OG. And let's be honest, Konami doesn't have the best track record when it comes to, well, being competent. Despite that, Konami, well, mainly Bloober Team, did prove everyone wrong with a surprisingly good Silent Hill 2 remake. However, something to note is that the Silent Hill 2 remake made some drastic changes, especially to the combat system. When it comes to Metal Gear Solid, however, we gotta stop and ask ourselves, how much change is really necessary? Better yet, how well does the original game hold up to today's standards? And to find that out, let's take a look back at the original game and look at just what this remake has to live up to. Metal Gear Solid 3 was released in 2004 and was a smash hit. It encompassed everything the series was known for up to that point, while still being a refreshing twist on the formula. And even 2 decades later, this game is still pretty good, and worth playing in 2024. So, let's take a closer look and see what the remake should keep the same and what it should change. And spoiler alert, it really shouldn't change much. Let's start with the gameplay, which is not often talked about with the Metal Gear series. Most people are so focused on the batshit insane shenanigans that happens in the story and often neglect the gameplay. But let me tell you, this game is fantastic. It is in my opinion the pinnacle of stealth games along with Splinter Cell. But unlike Splinter Cell, MGS3 gives you many loud options as well. It's the perfect balance of encouraging stealth while still giving tools if you need to go loud. But you know, I have a bit of a confession to make. I kind of suck at stealth games. In fact, I'm probably the worst kind of player because I'm a stealth purist, and yet I seem to always get caught with my pants down. Because no matter how tempting these guns may be, I will play this game the correct way. Okay, never mind. Well, that was fun, but moving on now, although this game has made some big changes compared to MGS2, it still has that old school mentality of game design. As a more modern gamer, this game initially felt confusing and unintuitive, but after a while I began to get used to it and saw that every piece had its own place in the puzzle. Things like changing the camera angle from the traditional top-down perspective to the free-moving third-person perspective was initially confusing at first, but eventually were essential in stealthing, and the level design perfectly complemented this new playstyle. Various locations require different camouflages, but each one has an optimal route to overcome them. It feels like solving a puzzle, and the game gives you more than enough pieces to do that in multiple ways. Now whenever the puzzle gets too annoying, you can always blow it up with explosive ordnance, so hey, there are options here. And sometimes going a full stealth run can be challenging considering how the AI in this game is pretty methodical. They will sweep places like real professionals, and hiding while in alert mode is a challenge. But in my opinion, if you were to play this game like an action game just shooting everyone in the face, it just wouldn't be very satisfying. This game is not designed around that, which is why the experience is lackluster to say the least. Hell, there were even times where I let the enemy kill me because going loud just wasn't as fun as being stealthy. Like I said before, I am a stealth purist, so going guns a-blazing just ain't my thing. Well, at least most of the time. When it comes to what this game does best compared to other Metal Gear Solids, I would say this game has the best boss fights. They are engaging and most incorporate stealth elements, letting you sneak around them and get the drop on them, which is always fun. My favorite has got to be the End. Not only is the End such an interesting character, but his boss fight is so open-ended. You can challenge him to a sniper duel, or you can sneak around him and blast him in the face. Each one of these fights offers something unique which makes them all memorable. But at its core, MGS3 is not just a stealth game, but a survival game as well. Resource management is a huge deal. You're not only conserving ammo, but also managing stamina, your suppressors have health bars, and all these things add to the survival aspects of this game. In old school Metal Gear Solid fashion, weapons aren't just handed to you willy-nilly. You could easily miss extremely helpful weapons because you just weren't looking for them. In fact, compared to older titles, this game's stealth systems are even more unforgiving as tools like a minimap now have a battery system and are drastically nerfed. It's a fun twist to the formula that adds a lot of depth to the gameplay. But there is one huge thing about this game that may need to be addressed, or this remake might be dead in the water. and it's the fact that this game is kind of clunky. Actually, most of the original Metal Gear Solids are like this as well, and although I thoroughly enjoy this game, I know a lot of modern gamers who just won't be able to deal with it. For some, the simple fact that you can't even crouch walk will be enough to drop the game. Most gamers nowadays would much prefer something like MGS3, where Snake controls like a dream. It's smooth and fluid, and you feel invincible moving around like a super soldier. So, you may think, why not just put the gameplay of 5 into MGS3? Well, I don't think that's a very good idea. Despite the stiff controls, the original game was made around those controls. Everything from level design to enemy AI was tailor-made around these controls, which makes it so it's almost a part of the challenge. If you just plopped MGS5's gameplay into MGS3, things would just be way too easy. So what do we do about this? Well, Konami has actually thought of this, and surprisingly, their solution is pretty good. Konami has revealed that this game will have two different playstyles, one of which is the legacy style, which is, you guessed it, classic control schemes, but the other is a new style, which, as Mr. Snake himself here states, is a modernized version of MGS3. Now, we don't have much to go off of, but it looks very similar to the Fox engine from MGS5. Now, I'll be honest, this is a great idea that gives the best of both worlds. Are you an old head who wants the classic gameplay? No problem. Are you a new gamer who wants more modern controls? This game has got you covered. Or does it? Because a part of me is still a little skeptical if modern style will fit this game. Like I said, everything about this game is tailor-made for the legacy playstyle. This then begs the question, will the modern controls actually work with the old level design? Because modern gameplay would require modern level design. Think of something like the RE4 remake, where yes, they did modernize the controls, but they had to remake the entire game to fit that new control scheme. Sure, level design is roughly the same, but the enemy AI is very different in the original. Enemies are much more aggressive and move faster to compensate for the modern controls of the remake. Compare this to the slower gameplay of the OG and it's night and day. But MGS3 can't do that, because if they change up the level design or the enemy AI, then the legacy style wouldn't work anymore. This means the new style would have to fit within the context of the old game design. If done poorly, the new style will most likely feel too easy, and the difficulty of MGS3 will just not be there. But if done right, then this will be a great addition, and as someone who has already played through the original game, I would be stoked to see it reimagined with newer controls. But we just have to wait and see if this will be the case. I wish they would give us some more gameplay for us to go off of, but for right now, all we can do is speculate. And hey, if new style turns out to not work very well, then legacy style will always be right there. Now, what should not be touched at all is the story, and Konami seems to get the memo. From everything they've shown, it seems they've left the cutscenes and dialogue all one-to-one, which is exactly as they should. Now, those unfamiliar with the series may be thinking, why is that so important? And it's for one reason, this guy. Or better yet, the lack of this guy. Kojima is the foundation of Metal Gear as a franchise, and a Metal Gear game without him, well, it just wouldn't be Metal Gear. And let me tell you, there is not a single person on the planet who could come up with a story as bananas as he can. The story in these games is one of the biggest reasons they're still relevant, and MGS3 is no different. While I prefer MGS2's story, MGS3's story is also fantastic and near perfect. It's an ideal prequel, revealing the backstory to the elusive big boss. But also the new characters are just top notch, each one deep and complex. And that ending is an emotional gut punch that will leave a big impression on you. I think MGS3 is a great starting point for the remake since it doesn't require too much prior knowledge, and compared to the other games in the series, it's probably the simplest to understand. But of course, don't let that fool you, because this game is still convoluted as hell, like any good Metal Gear game should be. It can be confusing at times, but I think that's part of the charm and nature of Metal Gear as a franchise. This game is jam-packed with long expositional dialogue, but every time it serves a purpose and adds to the story in a meaningful way. And besides, Kojima is just known for making these kinds of stories. Whether you believe Kojima is a genius or an absolute madman, you have to admit that his stories are unique and should be left alone. Plus, Kojima has a certain charm to his games and cutscenes that can't be replicated. It's the same as how every Tarantino knockoff can never truly be as good as the real deal. Speaking of film, I also feel that Kojima will make for an excellent filmmaker. His cutscenes have a certain style not only in their content, but the cinematography as well. Each camera angle and cut feels purposeful, like any good film should. It really does feel like a movie. Sometimes a wild acid trip of a movie, but still a movie nonetheless. The same can also be said for the absolutely iconic dialogue. I'm sure the diehard fans out there could probably recite whole scenes from this game, and for good reason. The dialogue has that same charm that makes it stick with you, and for entirely different reasons each time. This game is campy and has some ridiculously over-the-top moments, but there are also emotional moments, and its social political commentary is also quite insightful even 2 decades later. At the end of the day, this story holds a special place in many people's hearts, and the remake should not change how we see it. I get that some stories could use some touch-ups or could be improved upon, but this is not one of those stories. If anything, I think what we all want is to just see the same classic cutscenes except with better graphics, because if there's anything that Kojima puts a whole lot of effort into, it's his stories, and that legacy should be kept as it is. And I think if this remake really wants to get it right, then it has to nail the quirky little things that make this game so memorable. Things like little secrets that you can find or unique dialogue you can unlock make this game infinitely replayable. On my first playthrough, I completely missed the croc cap, which was an extremely helpful item in the following sections. There are even more obscure secrets, such as if you get the SVD early, you can kill the end early and you won't have to fight him later. Or there are things like the secret cutscene in the prison section where you have a heartfelt conversation with an enemy soldier. These aren't things the developers needed to add, but they breathe so much life in this game, and without them, it really wouldn't be MGS3. And there are other more quirky things about this game, like the ridiculously long ladder section, or the R1 scenes, which give the occasional look at Snake's perspective, which are very important for certain reasons. There are just so many little details that just make this game feel alive and show the passion behind it. All these things show that the original devs took time and effort to really make sure they were making the best game they possibly could. And the question remains now is, does Konami have that same mentality? Now they haven't shown us much, so we can't be too certain on whether this game will deliver, but knowing Konami, they aren't the best when it comes to Metal Gear. I think I speak for everyone when I say that the Master Collection was unacceptable and an absolute disaster at launch. Even now, it still isn't completely fixed. For instance, whenever I got to the tutorial for the cure menu, my game would just crash, every single time. This effectively soft-locked me from the rest of the game, and I looked online to see that other people had the same problem, but with no solution in sight. I tried everything, and even installed a fan patch to see if it would fix it, but surprise surprise, it didn't. What I ended up doing was installing the game on my laptop just to play through that one section, and then continue my playthrough on my desktop. But this should not happen for a game in 2024, and it worries me that if Konami was this lazy in creating this port, how can they be trusted with a full-fledged remake? Only time will tell if Konami is going to actually make a functional product, but let's just say that pre-orders do not sound appealing at the moment. But disregarding that, I still have some doubts. They have confirmed the cutscenes are faithful from shot to shot, which I love, and the little gameplay they've shown has looked pretty good, but once again the lack of a release date at this point is concerning to say the least. But if we're going to be optimistic, then it could mean they're taking their time and making sure they deliver the best product they possibly can, which for a game as detailed as MGS3 is always better than a rushed release. But if anything, I don't think Konami has to do much when it comes to sweeping changes. As this video has hopefully shown you, this game holds up very well, and for many fans, if all they did was improve the graphics and make the game a little less clunky, then we would be happy. This game is for many a masterpiece already, and this remake should just be an opportunity for a new generation of gamers to experience that same game from 2 decades ago. But if you are curious, I still recommend the original game if you haven't played it. It's incredible and an absolute blast from start to finish. At the end of the day, MGS3 is a very special game that doesn't need to be tampered with too much, and if this remake wants to get it right, then it really shouldn't have to do much at all. But that's gonna be enough from me, so thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified of every upload, and I will catch you another time.